But for now, let's check in with Labor MP, the member for Kingsford Smith, Matt Thistlethwaite, who joins us from the Sydney CBD. Thanks for joining us, Matt.
Pleasure, Chris.
Tell me about this speech that we're yet to hear from, but a lot of it's been reported already in the newspapers, where Josh Frydenberg's talking about the need to retrain older Australians to keep them working longer. On one level, this is common sense because we're living longer, but on another level, it's very difficult for some Australians to keep working, depending what their job is, beyond their early to mid-60s.
Chris, the Treasurer's been good at delivering speeches outlining what the issues and problems for Australia are. Not so good with coming up with plans and policies to deal with it. This is an issue that's been in the media and had the attention of policymakers for some years now. It's been identified in successive intergenerational reports, but the government's been in office for over 6 years now and they haven't come up with a policy to deal with it. In fact, the policies they came up with to raise the pension age to 70 and the like, they dumped. So, you know, a lot of talk from the government, but not much action.
Yeah, they scrapped raising the pension age to 70, but I think with Labor support it was raised to 67. It's heading up to 67 incrementally. Do you think that's about right, that the retirement age now should be 67, or should it go to 70?
Look, we think that it's right. There's a big difference between 67 and 70, particularly, as you pointed out earlier, if you're a bricklayer or you work in a manual occupation where you've been you know, labouring all of your working life, working outdoors, and sometimes in harsh environments in the heat. That can take its toll on a person. But what you really need to look at, Chris, is opportunities for people to retrain, particularly at those crucial years of 55 through to 65, where we're finding that a lot of people are falling out of the workforce and not getting the retraining opportunities. They're the years that you need to really concentrate on so that people can then make their own decisions about how long they want to work beyond the pension age if they need to. And also ensuring that you have an adequate superannuation system so that people have enough in their superannuation to retire with a decent balance and may not need to work.
I think it's a real
beyond their 70s.
This is a real policy conundrum. You know, it's beyond sort of partisan politics, I think. Obviously, the government's in power now. They've got to find ways to deal with it. I think Josh Frydenberg is going to talk about retraining for older Australians so that they can adjust their career. But there needs to be some sort of differentiation, doesn't there? I mean, if you're a television journalist or a lawyer or an accountant, maybe even a teacher, working longer is not going to be a problem. You probably embrace the chance to keep working as long as you can. But if you are in a physically demanding job, you can't always transition to a managerial or supervisor role. You might not always want to. And doing physical labour well into your 60s and beyond, you know, would seem too much of a stretch. Maybe if you're in that line of work, there could be a differentiation in the pension age.
Yeah, you're right. You need to come up with a system that caters for the differences in occupations and the effects on the body and indeed the enthusiasm and the willingness of people to work to a particular age. And one crucial element in that, Chris, is the training system. So cutting funding for TAFE, which has traditionally been the mechanism through which many Australians have received trade training, have received occupational training, and making those courses much more expensive, which is what's occurred under this government, doesn't really help that. So what we were proposing at the last election was incentives for employers to take on older workers through tax concessions, but also providing scholarships for people to take on not only retraining but apprenticeships in particular areas where there were skill shortages.
Matt Thistlethwaite, I want to get to the issue of veterans, and we've talked about these issues a lot on this program, and a push from a number of veterans groups, a number of individuals and organisations wanting a royal commission into the treatment of our veterans, particularly high rates of suicide, post-traumatic stress disorders and the like. And reports today tell us that the Veterans Affairs Minister, Darren Chester, has rejected the idea of a royal commission. What are your thoughts on that? What's Labor's position on that?
Look, it's a very serious issue, Chris. I attended on behalf of the Labor Party the forum that was held at the New South Wales Parliament a couple of weeks ago that was hosted by the Daily Telegraph, and it was reported widely in the media. And I can tell you that speaking to the mothers of those soldiers who'd unfortunately taken their own lives, who'd had post-traumatic stress issues and certainly depression and anxiety issues in the wake of their service, were quite harrowing. And they've been calling for a Royal Commission for some months now. We all know that it's not the Parliament's job to call Royal Commissions, it's the job of the government. And if the government were to come up and call a Royal Commission, that's something that Labor certainly would give very, very serious consideration to. But we do need to do something. I have every sympathy for the stories and the plight of these mothers that are representing many others in our community.
Now, Matt Thistlethwaite, if I remember correctly, you have a special position within Labor to try and, shall we say, marshal the issue of republicanism for your party. You must be sitting back, notwithstanding the fact they're dealing with serious issues, you must be enjoying the spectacles that Prince Andrew and Prince Harry are making of themselves in the media these days.
Yeah, I do have that responsibility, Chris, and it's something that I'm very, very proud of. I believe that, look, regardless of what the royal family does, Australia should become a republic in due course, and we should have a serious discussion about that in Australia. I know that there's been a lot of reportage over the last couple of days about Prince Andrew's comments. I certainly think that they were insensitive and inappropriate comments. But at the end of the day, the decision for Australians to become a republic is one for us. It's not related to the royal family. It's about us recognising that we're an independent nation with our own culture, our own identity, our own confidence, and we should be mature enough to make this decision regardless of what's going on within the royal family. And that's the arguments that I've been trying to make in society, and I'm just hopeful that eventually we can again get to a position where we can discuss this and someone can show some leadership on it and make sure that we get to another decision for the Australian public through a referendum.